Well, President Trump has made rolling back regulations a flagship mission of his administration, most recently signing an executive order to cut red tape to fast-track the economic recovery from the coronavirus. Many are calling for that deregulation to be made permanent, as a new report shows federal regulations end up costing average American households $14,000 a year. I do want to now bring in Washington Examiner columnist Brad Polumbo to talk more about those costs for taxpayers. Hi, Brad. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks.
First off, a breakdown real quickly for our viewers what the report from Competitive Enterprise Institute did find about the cost of government regulations for taxpayers.
Yeah, absolutely. So it found almost $2 trillion in total costs imposed by federal regulations. You know, I know that most people aren't thinking about federal regulation when they go to the voting booth, but this actually is an issue, this overreaching regulation of businesses that affects everyone. Like you mentioned, the report found that $14,000 on average are imposed on families and households. And actually the total cost at $1.9 trillion sounds like some abstract sum, but if that was a country's economy, it would be the 9th biggest economy in the world. So we're talking about colossal costs imposed by the government on our economy, and they're flying under the radar.
President Trump has, of course, made deregulation a key focus for his administration since entering office. How can he do more, though, and what happens to these efforts when the next president takes over?
Well, President Trump's one of his biggest accomplishments has been deregulation. He can do two main things to take it one step farther. Some of this will have to happen at the state and local level, but at the federal level, President Trump should ensure that his administration makes sure that all these temporary regulations being waived to help the coronavirus response don't come back. I mean, if you have a regulation that is barring restaurants from serving outside without the proper license or all sorts of silly things, telemedicine restrictions that can be so easily repealed temporarily during a crisis to help people, why did they ever exist at all? So the Trump administration should be trying to make the temporary COVID-19 deregulations all permanent. And the other thing the president needs to do to keep the deregulatory agenda going and make sure it helps relaunch the economy is to stay away from some of his impulses on a few issues like trade or social media policy, where he actually leans towards more regulation, because as we've seen, those kinds of regulations always have unintended consequences and costs.
Okay, Brad, we of course cannot ignore the unrest currently happening across the country. Violent rioters overtaking peaceful protests, looting businesses, and destroying communities. Many of these demonstrations are happening, though, in areas that have already been hit hard by the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. How much does this destruction add to the devastation that so many are already facing from the coronavirus?
You know, at a nationwide level, it's impossible to have any numerical estimate yet, but on the individual level, we can already see that people are going to be ruined by this. I mean, I watched in horror this weekend, video after video of rioting and looting, and the places being destroyed more often than not are minority-owned businesses. You know, I saw a story of a firefighter, African-American firefighter, who had saved up money to launch a bar, burned to the ground, no insurance. He and many others are going to be irreparably damaged and harmed by these riots, even though they're supposed to be the ones that these people ostensibly care about that are rioting. So individual lives will be ruined by these riots and this looting. It just remains to be seen how many people it will actually affect.
Brad, you mentioned the issue of insurance. I know many business owners have, during COVID-19, taken the step to make their insurance cheaper by maybe raising their premiums or possibly even getting rid of some of the insurance that would cover the damage caused by these types of riots. What can business owners do in that type of situation as they're facing the devastation from coronavirus and then also the devastation from this unforeseen rioting and looting happening?
Well, it's hard to know what you should do as a business owner in terms of those specific insurance policies, but that's why it's so important that the government not allow wanton destruction of property rights and private businesses. I mean, across the country this weekend, these riots were going on and this looting was happening while police were told by government authorities to stand down. And we've seen some states finally calling in the National Guard, but if the government can't protect private property and small businesses from absolute anarchy, the government is failing at its most basic function that is necessary for the economy to function. So that's got to change quickly.
All right, Brad Polumbo, a columnist for the Washington Examiner, joining us to discuss deregulation amid the coronavirus pandemic and the economic impact of riots during this time. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Brad.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube. And call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.